You're pretty much nailing it. Like, this is why I spent so much energy and time reading self-help books, like going to therapy, learning about Buddhism, learning about like various forms of spirituality, like experimenting with psychedelics for deeper self-reflection. And the reason is because when you're in a situation where you basically have to develop this sense of, you have to actually genuinely distrust most voices, right? You have to distrust the person that says that you are a genius, and you also have to distrust the person that says you are an absolute piece of you have to summon this strong inner constitution that has this compass of what you think is good, what you think is right, what you think is like, you know, worth spending time and energy on. And you need to tune out all other noise besides basically the one that's inside of you.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends. An honor to have you in the Mind Meld, as always, as it is to welcome back my wonder brother, Colin Frangicetto, / introduce him to the budding YouTube audience. Colin is I would say, wildly successful artist under both his own name and the pseudonym ADHD / Space Case. He's also well known as a musician in the legendary band Circa Survive. Colin and I also went on a harrowing, wonderful, and everything in between Peruvian ayahuasca retreat a couple years back. Of course, we riff on that in this pod. Side note, if you're interested and you want to hear the whole tale in detail, there's a multi-part ayahuasca adventure series we recorded. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. Do subscribe to Third Eye Drops wherever you listen to pods, by the way. I've been doing this a long time. We have over 300 audio-only mind melds. But in addition to being a talented artist and musician and true seeker, Colin really is one of the kindest, biggest-hearted human beings I know. He makes me want to be a nicer, more generous person. But with that, in this one, we riff about so much. We kind of revisit the story of how we initially connected, and we get into how friendships and priorities evolve around something more important, something more purposeful as you get older, or they just lose their luster. We also share what is, without a doubt, the most insane synchronicity I or he have ever been a part of. This is a joint, multi-dimensional, multi-location synchronicity, so you're going to get the story of that toward the end of the pod. He also shares kind of a surprising, nuanced take on what it's like to be a successful artist, especially in a really successful band. It's kind of a surprising take. We also get into the kind of mystical side of the creative process and how Colin connects to the Muse. And like I said, so much more. So let's just leave the introductory rambles at that. Of course, I will ask you to tickle the algorithm with a like and a sub, a comment, a share. All of it really does help, but most of all, like and subscribe.
Do it.
I also hope you will consider joining the perpetual mind meld, the ever-present wonder dip over at the Third Eye Drops Patreon. It's not only the best way to support the show, we're riffing in the Discord, doing patron-only gatherings, patron-only content, links for that in the description as well. And with that, my friends, let's meld minds with my wonder brother, Colin Frangicetto. Drink in that infinite nectar that is the oxygen that just fills your lungs and sustains you with life, yet nobody seems remotely interested in that fact. Yeah, like that's one of those things I tend to think about when I'm like on microdose days or something, where you have just those random thoughts, or you just think about the ubiquity of oxygen and how crazy it is that you just can breathe, and that someday you probably won't be able to breathe, and then that will be a massive bummer.
Certainly.
So one of my intentions with this pod is that I'm trying to slowly, obviously, ramp up to a new audience on YouTube, and it's been a a struggle for sure. But given that some of the regulars I have on, I feel like I kind of want to like revisit some things, recontextualize some relationships, and go down a bit of a trip down memory lane. And to that point, you know what I tried to do just before this, and it was just like I couldn't do it because there were just far too many messages. As I was trying to go to the very, very, very first Instagram messages you and I exchanged,
Oh.
just to see like what they were. I'm like, oh man, I can't, because I know we were introduced through Jen, but I
Hmm.
don't remember like what the first thing we said to one another was. So I'm like, oh man, this would be cool to go back and look at this. And then I realized that at a minimum, it had to be like 4 years ago at least, because we obviously went to Peru in 2019. So it has to be at least 2018.
It was 2018.
That's
It
crazy, dude.
was it was I think we started talking in May of 2018. And then I believe that we podcasted. I don't know if it could have been that long, but I saw that yeah, my first appearance was June 2018.
That makes sense then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I guess not quite 4 years, but either way, like in my mind, we're still like new friends. And maybe
Hmm.
that's just like what it becomes when you get older, is just the length of time. Hey, let's talk about time, Colin. Maybe we should do a podcast where we talk about time. Um, yeah,
But on the real though, I was thinking about how we should definitely do like a 5-year anniversary episode, like that comes out the same day as that episode. Would be cool.
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Um,
I saw how many times I've been on your podcast today.
oh yeah, what do I have to guess now?
You, I bet you will be severely off.
9. What is it?
This right here, my friend, is the 21st.
No way. It can't
Yes,
be. No way.
it's absolutely.
Wow. I genuinely don't believe you. I
I
genuinely don't believe
swear
you.
to God.
Well,
We
that
so you
really
have
does
to
surprise me.
yeah, it well that this is counting, you know, like the thing that we did with Sarah
Oh yeah.
at in LA, just that little,
Hmm.
we didn't even have a microphone, I don't think.
I think
Um
we used an omnidirectional setting on a Yeti and it did not sound good.
yeah.
Yeah.
But just stuff like that. Like um anytime I just looked up my name and Third Eye Drops, and they were all different singular episodes, and it was 20.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
And I guess, because of like the ayahuasca trip and stuff like that, we did do a lot of pods around that in quick succession. So I
I
guess
think
that
that was
does
like
kind.
5 total.
Yeah. So that does make some amount of sense. But still mind blowing nonetheless. I do remember early on in our friendship, you being like, I want to have more episodes than like Corey, or I want to have more episodes than like some other person who's been on a ton. And you're close. You're getting close.
Yeah. Not genuinely. I didn't actually want to have more, but yeah.
Well, is your cat peeking real cute right now through the window? I just
This
saw
is
it. That
this
was
is
so
like his
cute.
room too. Like he hangs
Yeah.
out in here all the time and probably wants to get to his food, but if I let him in, he's gonna like wreak havoc. So
Yeah.
I have to keep him out there.
No, I have to keep an animal free zone in my domain as well during recordings. It doesn't work. I can hear the cat meowing through the door and it's distracting me right now. But yeah, man, like so first of all, it really is mind blowing. Second of all, I will resist the urge to talk about for another philosophical conversation about time, because as other people who have been down the Michael and Colin auditory saga rabbit hole, they are well aware that somehow time seems to come up as a topic in every possible
Immediately.
permutation. And here we go again. But
Hmm.
so now that we've at least recontextualized, I guess we didn't even really recontextualize how we met one another. Like I personally was aware of you from decades ago because of Circa, the band that you started and were very successful with for decades and decades. And I loved your band, so I was aware of who you were. But then years go by, and then I hear from my friend Jen that you listen to Third Eye Drops, and I was like, I know who that dude is. That's fucking crazy. So then we were just like mutually aware of one another through our creative emanations, and then now we've texted or talked like pretty much every day for for almost 4 years, which is insane.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think so. I think so. It's
It'll be 5 years in May, right? 2018,
well, I guess
2023.
oh shit, yeah. I don't know why I was thinking it would be 4.
We're already past 4.
Oh my god, dude. What?
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe we've been trying to plan an in-person.
Resist.
Yeah.
Resist.
Well,
Don't
we've
go
been.
down the rabbit hole.
I was going to say we've been trying to plan an in-person hang, obviously,
Hmm.
and maybe that's what we do. Maybe we do uh, around that time, and then
Okay.
we do something. But
Sure.
anyway, yeah. And I think the other thing too that makes like I don't know what it's like for you because you actually you know we've talked about a lot how you've reinvented yourself as well, like as an artist, as a creative. So maybe you're meeting a lot of people through that, but I just don't meet a lot of people that I meet a ton of acquaintances online. Like there's a ton of people that semi regularly message me, or we have niceties. But in terms of people that I consider like good friends and like hangout level friends and talk almost
Hmm.
every day friends, I don't make a lot of them like at this point in my life. So the ones that I do make, I feel like it's extra precious, and the ones that revolve around something deeper than surface level interests are that much more valuable. And I feel like maybe that's why as we get older it does become harder and harder to make friends, because you're not really interested in the superficial level friendships as much anymore, and it's harder and harder to find friendships worth really building around, because it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to go out and drink with you. I'm not going to go out and like, you know, do the same shit I did back in college or whatever. Like I'd rather just like stay home or something. And
Hmm.
but now it's like when I do find these friends like you, like Corey, like Jen, like a handful of other people, it's really special to me because then there's like a sacred nucleus to the friendship, and I think that's what so many people are looking for, but they just have no idea how to find.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, friendship is strange. I think um as you get older it just becomes more and more apparent how much of it is sort of like um geographically based or just sort of like situational, uh and then the ones that transcend that become more apparent, you know. I always had an interesting relationship with all of that because I was so transient. It was just always um, traveling, so it was like really difficult to maintain regular friendships because I think a lot of people, they just kind of expect you to be around if you're going to be um, a regular friend in that way. And I guess over the course of like my touring career, like things changed a lot. People became more and more used to having like regular text relationships with people and just sort of keeping up, you know, on social media or whatever.
Yeah.
I think all of that changed. It kind of added some. some tiers of friendship that maybe didn't exist prior. Um, and you have to wonder, like, if we didn't like walk through the fire together, if we didn't like
Oh yeah.
jump on that plane and go to Peru together and really kind of solidify our bond in real life kind of way, I wonder like how close we would still be. I would think we probably would still be in contact for sure regularly, but that definitely was like,
Mm-hmm.
a very
Mm-hmm.
bonding experience.
Yeah. I almost feel like if we didn't do that, we would have done something else. I
Probably.
almost feel like us doing something akin to that together just made so much sense and
Hmm.
will continue to make sense into the future. Like I feel like we'll do more things like that despite the fact that it's been multiple years, but we do have to give some kind of grace to the fact that there was like 2 years where no one was comfortable doing anything or things weren't open or
Right.
whatever. But yeah, I think that's the other thing is that when you so the sacred nucleus that I was referring to, you know, it's not just a philosophical thing, it is an experiential thing with you and I because we went to Peru together, we drank ayahuasca together a bunch of times. And that immediately, as we've talked about before, that immediately just cuts through all of the bullshit surface level parts of being friends. I mean, and we
Hmm.
even went through this with the complete strangers that we were at the retreat with. Like,
Yep.
again, as I've talked about, like after the ceremony one, the absolute chaotic mess that was, it just immediately shreds all of the the niceties and boundaries and the guards that people have up. And it's just like, yeah, I heard you cussing out everyone in the room last night and having to get removed for being too disruptive in a room where everyone was being disruptive, and you were the outlier of, just as an example, like, you're going to be a different kind of familiar and friendly with a person after an experience like that. But then
Yeah.
also that coupled with the fact that we had all of these other things in common, like it's a unique friendship. And I think all of my friendships that I've made that I was alluding to before that are valuable in recent years are all unique, but ours I feel like is unique among the unique for several reasons. But the ayahuasca experience is definitely one of them. And I have to say that it's starting to get to a point now for me where it's feeling very distant though. Like it feels almost like a story of a thing that happened, more like a visceral memory.
Hmm.
And I feel like that might be a sign that it's time to do something else.
Yeah, definitely. The LA trip was another one that was
Yeah,
bonding,
for sure.
sharing that house together for however long that was, what, 3 or 4 days. That was awesome.
Yeah. For some reason I'm like having trouble remembering that house, but I remember the New York one.
Oh, right.
I remember the
Yeah.
New York one, but I don't remember where we stayed. Oh
In
no, now I
LA?
do. Now I do. Yeah, yeah, that was way cooler. That house was way cooler than the New York one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, so that's another thing that I would love to rekindle is that we used to do these events that our friend Jen kind of spearheaded called Whitma, and Colin and I were part of at least two together,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Two.
think there was a third. There was a third that was before I knew you. I'm pretty sure, but yeah, I mean, it was just this kind of like interdisciplinary, philosophical, new agey thing.
Panels,
Panels,
stuff.
yeah, hangs,
Mm-hmm.
random air quotes, shamans doing strange things to people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, there definitely would be elements of it I don't think I would rekindle, but just the gathering, just creating the space, I definitely want to do that again and do it probably in my own way. Like if you were going to do or be part of an event as someone who's been to so many events, has played so many events, what kind of thing would you want to do?
I don't know, man. I'm like, the more distance I get away from performing and touring, the more I realize how introverted I am, and like how like borderline antisocial I am. Um, I really, when I think about like speaking about that house that we rented together in LA, like there was one night that we were there. There was a ton of us. It was like
Yeah,
you, me, Sarah, Sarah Z. It was like one of the first times we hung out with Sarah Zucker, and then
yeah,
Shane Moss,
yep.
Ramin, Matt. Like it was a huge group of us there,
Hmm. My old
and it
friend
was,
Sam was there too. Yep.
oh yeah, and we just had this like really awesome round table kind
Yeah,
of like, it was super casual, but we just
yeah,
had this like 3 to 4 hour just like discussion back and forth, that just felt really cool.
yes, it did.
And I don't know, something like that would be really enjoyable to me, where it's like you just get a small, but like, you know, larger than like normal hang group of people together for like, you know, series of different discussions on different topics that are just like casual, and you just record it and
That'd be cool.
whatever. Something like that would be really interesting. I don't know. I'm just like kind of over the, I don't know, weird performative like events. I don't know. There's something about it that like, I think
Yeah.
maybe it is like just part of my antisocial stuff, but
Hmm.
I just want like genuine interaction, right? Like,
Yeah, 1,000%. I am not interested in anything else.
yeah.
The only reason I would think that it would need to be an event is that something like what you described, which obviously I adore with my entire heart and soul, having these like-minded hangs where everybody is intellectually unique and interesting in a way that's like indispensable. Just like
Mhm.
being in the room with like you and Sarah Zucker and Ramin and Shane and myself, just being able to just like talk and bounce
Yeah.
ideas off each other
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I love it so much. But then it's like, well, what about people who aren't in our direct group of friends that would also love a chance to hang out? Like that's the only reason,
That's
you
why you
know,
invite them.
yeah. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I can't invite like every Third Eye Drops patron, or you couldn't invite all of your patrons, but
But
they
we could
could.
record it
This
and
this is true.
broadcast it or whatever. I don't know. It's like one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there would be some kind of thing that you could put together that could be interesting and fun. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. Anytime I think about like an audience or like organizational tasks for like some kind of event, I'm just like, ugh, no thanks.
I get that, man. I get that. Like I was telling you before, I have emails sitting in my inbox that have been in my inbox way too long from
Yeah,
people I care about and for podcasts I care about. And if there's not, it's sad, but I'm sure you can relate. I don't know if you're like me exactly in your procrastination, but for me, it's like if there's not an imminency to it, I'm not gonna rush to get to it often, and that's probably something I need to work on because
that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, what do you think that like avoidance is about?
I, you know, part of me wants to be like, I don't know if it's anything deeper than the fact that I'm just lazy and the fact that it's convenient and there's no repercussions. But I do think there is something deeper. And I think the, so this is kind of interesting. This is might be a bit of a left turn from what you're expecting, but I think it will make sense. But there's this concept that this woman I had on the pod yesterday brought up, a brilliant psychiatrist, but she's also into a lot of things that would raise the brow of a lot of other academics. Like she's very into Kabbalah. She believes in psychics. She uses language that definitely would, make a lot of orify pucker in certain circles, but she's bulletproof in her training, in her, you know, intellectual rigor. But we were talking about Kabbalah yesterday, and she reminded me of something. Like I went down the Kabbalah rabbit hole fairly significantly, probably like a decade ago, I would say.
Mhm.
And she reminded me of one of the core kind of parts of Kabbalah, which is correction. And they believe that there's this effort that we all should go through, should we choose to go down the path of self-discovery and soul evolution, or whatever you want to call it. And it's that you come into this life with certain soul corrections that are required. And when I look back on my life, this question that you're asking me has been a persistent thing that I think may go all the way to like the root of the psyche,
Hmm.
where I don't know why, but I've always been a fucking procrastinator. I've always been somebody who tries to like wiggle their way out, like wiggle their way out of certain things, and like, well, wanting to skip steps, wanting to take shortcuts. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that that's not the best way to go about things. Like I've realized that the things that you suffer for and work for and achieve are way more valuable than things that you can take shortcuts for. And I think in a way that mentality isn't the worst thing, because there are a lot of things in life that I think are not worth wasting your time on, and they're total obligations, and you just have to like get them out of the way. But then the problem is if that becomes your default way of approaching a problem or something that you're doing, that's not good. And I need to be careful of that, because man, every year car registration is overdue. Every year, it's like the same shit. It's a pattern, it's like it's a thing that I struggle with, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, some of that stuff is, I think, at least for me, like correlated with like neurodivergence stuff. Like, I have so many things that are just like strange, like, yeah, avoidance and like procrastination, where like anxiety is definitely part of the mix, but I can't really put my finger on like why I'm putting something off or avoiding
Hmm.
it, because it just makes things worse.
Yeah, right.
It's very strange. But it's also like, um finalizing decisions is really difficult. There's a lot of anxiety around that. That's a little more understandable, I guess.
Yeah,
But even small things, it's just
yeah,
like, um, I've had to like do a lot of work and sort of add some, you know, stuff into my brain where it's like, how much weight do I really need to give this, and am I better off just pulling the trigger right now? You know, some especially when it's arbitrary, and I'm like, I can't let this like take up bandwidth. you know
right. That's
but
the
it
thing.
it will.
Yeah, it will. And I share that, man. Like even before every podcast, there's this like tiny part of me that wants to like sabotage and put off the whole thing or cancel the whole thing. There's always
Oh.
that weird like, oh, do I really want to do this right now? And I've learned that voice is just like almost never, I was going to say never worth listening to, but I think every now and then that, in I think everybody knows that there is no absolutes when it comes to the psychology or whatever. But almost always that voice, like if we really boiled it down to like an IFS, internal family systems,
Hmm.
um
Like a
very,
part.
yeah, like a very very quick dirty explanation for people who aren't familiar with that. There's a little school of psychology that's emerged in recent years where you try to incarnate parts of your psyche and as if they're a person. So it's like if there's this part of you that wants to procrastinate, that wants to sabotage, and you had to give that thing a name give it characteristics, figure out what it wants, why it's doing these things. It's kind of like a way to interact with that as if it's a person you can have a conversation with, or, whatever. And if I boil it down to that thing, I know that it's just like a relative of fear. And most kinds of fear, especially around doing things like, or challenging yourself, are almost never worth listening to, because all they do is like, if you could remove your awareness from your ego and look at it from a third person perspective, and that thing, that higher consciousness, was like, okay, but is this a reason to not do it? The answer is no. Like, it's not a reason to not do it. So that's how I managed to like get through it. And it varies. It's like, some days is a time, like today it was a didn't even exist. Like, I really wanted to talk to you. But on some days it's like, oh, I just fucking don't want to, you know? And I'm sure it also is a lot. It's just neurotransmitters, baby. It's just how caffeinated am I? What did I microdose that day? Like all these different things. Those definitely play a strong role as well. So it's not all like a big philosophical question, but
Sure.
it is something I know for sure I need to work on. And I've actually been considering doing some kind of fairly lengthy reset thing where there's this laundry list of things that everybody is like, I really should stop doing this. I really should stop drinking coffee for a while. I really should
Mhm.
read more. I really should journal. I really should meditate, all of those things. And I'm playing with the idea of take at least a 2 week or 4 week chunk of time, identify all of those things you say you want to do more of, identify all the things you should do less of, and actually do an exchange, and like actually do the things you want to do more of and actually do less of the things you want to do less of. So I think I'm going to do that, and I think I'm going to somewhat document it, and to force myself to actually do it.
Cool.
Have you ever done any like hardcore resets like that?
Nothing that like really comes to mind. I mean, I feel like I do, you know, there have definitely been a lot of times in my life where I'm like, all right, I have to change something. And, like quitting smoking, for instance, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say nothing that really rings a bell that is like too similar to what you're talking about. That sounds very intentional and like very it's like more broad than just like one specific bad behavior. It's like I don't know.
Well, I think that's the way you should do it. I think you should really commit to one thing at a time. But if I'm honest with myself, I know that I have the willpower and the ability to do these things because I've
Mhm.
done hard things in the past. It's just that I have to like I have to like get over the mental hurdle of being like, I am fucking doing this, And that's, again, when you don't have to, and there's no one forcing you to do anything, you just
Mhm.
tend not to do it.
Mhm.
And I should add that I think you're already a way more disciplined person than I am in some ways. Like, you're way more disciplined with what you eat and what you don't eat. You're creatively, I think you're very disciplined. I mean, it seems like you're publishing artwork like every day. That's pretty impressive to me. So you might be more disciplined in certain ways than I am already. So
Comes and goes in waves, like definitely struggle with discipline when it comes to food and all that stuff. I definitely struggle with like vices, like drinking and smoking weed and stuff like that. It's all related to trauma and like um I feel like output and like productivity and discipline and all this stuff, it is like very um correlated to emotional, just like where you're at emotionally, psychologically. And for me, it's interesting. Like sometimes I will feel this duality of like I've been feeling it a lot lately because like I'll have like I've been having a lot of days lately where I'm just like overwhelmed by a success of sorts or like dopamine from
Mm-hmm.
from attention that I'm getting or something. And like I'll feel this other feeling of like pain or like
Hmm.
isolation or like feeling extremely um misunderstood. Like it's really I don't know, it's there's something I think it might just have to do with being heavily engaged with like the Muse, where like I'm kind of ripped open a lot and like trying to feel things on a deep level and create from a place that's genuine and not um not really related to social media clicks and like um
Yeah, like being timely or being
yeah,
on
numbers.
brand.
I'm trying to like exist in the realm of feelings and like spirit and
Yeah.
things like that when I'm making stuff. And like simultaneously, I also have to do all this other shit that's very type A. And I think that creates this weird like schism, like where I'm kind of doing both at the same time often. And I become sort of like consciously aware of it in a moment, and I get this whelming feeling of like, emotionality. I don't know how to
Yeah.
describe it really.
No, man. I think everybody goes through what you're talking about to an extent because if you boil down the way you're going through it is much different than like a business guy would go through
Right.
it or something. But I think everybody goes through their own permutation of it, whether they actually recognize that they're going through it or not. And specifically, one of the ways that comes to mind that I think is easy to conceive of is Young had this thing he would do when he was a kid where he would refer to himself as self one and self two. Or it was
Mm,
self, maybe it was self A and self B. I can't remember. It's one or two or A and B. And the one is the type A out in the world, having to do things, having to jump through hoops,
yeah.
um, outward facing part of the psyche. And the person two is what we could either conceive of as the inner or the true self. Like to him, he saw it as both the inner and the true self. And I think maybe depending on personality type, you may not feel that that's more of a true self than the outward. But digressing from that, I think everybody feels that dualistic divide in themselves. Like this is the me people see, and then this is the me on the inside, and
Hmm.
my own intrinsic experience, and then the lifelong process of trying to unify those two things in a way that feels true and feels hopefully even medicinal is something I think 99 plus percent of people don't achieve, because you may not think that you are deep down that path, my friend, but you a long time ago shunned the right hand path that most people go down of like the well worn, the job, the whatever. Because I think you told me at some point that you were just like, I would rather be fucking homeless than do that. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't work at a desk. And when you make that kind of a decision, I think you make a certain kind of covenant with that deeper part of yourself. And that in and of itself, I think, is such a fucking massive thing to do at any point in your life. And I don't think most people ever even get there. And I'm not saying you have to quit your day job, you have to do this or that necessarily, but it's sort of like an understanding you have with yourself to try as hard as you can to just be true to yourself and
Hmm.
try to live authentically.
Yep.
But I also think that there are unique pains on that path, like unique initiatory, like archetypal pains that you go through when you go down that path, because everything is inherently only yours. You know, it's your art is, and your process is only yours, and what it feels like when you put it out in the world is only yours. What it feels like when you're, you know, no one else knows, no one else knows. And that's what I mean. And Jung spoke about that too, like the loneliness and the pain of the path. And that's a real thing too, but I'd rather have that authentic kind of pain than the fucking just hamster wheel of obligatory shenanigans, you know? It's like, fuck that. Fuck that.
I feel like there's no escaping the obligatory shenanigans. Like to some extent, there's some layer of them you still have to deal with. It's like there's no way out of it. But
Agreed.
I know what you mean, and yeah, like I've definitely opted for, you know, I've chosen many a hardship over certain types of normalcy, just because I knew it just didn't work for me. Um, so I definitely get that, and I do think that you know, I have less of those shenanigans that you're talking about than
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of other people. But you know, I don't know. I've been trying to embrace even deeper parts of myself, and sort of engage in this process of like unmasking that Sarah's been going through ever since her diagnosis, and just sort of going going deeper into the parts of myself that are like different, and uh when I feel like sensing when I feel discomfort, and trying to do what is comfortable in moments like sitting across from someone that you really have zero interest in talking to. Like I've been practicing the act of not forcing it and just sitting there and just letting it be awkward, and letting them do whatever they're going to do, and like not giving into this weird desire to like make them comfortable over myself. Um, and it's really interesting. I mean, I've just been like doing these little experiments here and there, just trying to be as authentic as possible. And what that really means is that sometimes people will be uncomfortable
Hmm.
around you,
Hmm.
and sometimes I have to lean into that. And
Yeah,
um, it's definitely a fascinating thing to do.
that is interesting. Yeah, because dude, if you really take apart all of the weird little social cues and nonverbal niceties that we're all just trained on,
Hmm.
I think everyone would be shocked in not only all of the little things they do, but all of the little things other people do,
Hmm.
down to the weird, what do I do with my face? What do I do with my, you know, and the again, man, these are the thoughts I have when I'm on psychedelics for sure.
Yeah.
Where it's just like you think about all of the weird little ways your ego and your persona operate in the world. And there's always a very kind of I am so important, you know, like kind of undertone to it, where
Uh-huh.
you just realize how silly and ludicrous all of these things that we do are. Yet at the same time, it's like, yeah, we're just, you know, when you and I enter into a conversation, I mean, not even a recorded one, but if when I say you and I, I'm just saying two hypothetical humans. It's
Sure.
like there's a weird little social contract that's unspoken that we're forming, and then we're exchanging information to whatever end we feel compelled to. And then hopefully we both leave that interaction feeling neutral or better. You know, that it's like that's kind of what it boils down to. But then when you know that you're in a situation that you don't even really want to be in, you're just there for through whatever twists of circumstances. then yeah, it is really interesting to just sit there and take that whole thing apart and think to yourself about all of the weird little ways we're coerced into behaving in social interactions. And yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is recently I just spent some time with a friend I haven't seen in a really, really long time. And um he's extremely extroverted, has a big group of friends, is I would say he's what most people would call broy, but and his friends are too. So I was in this group of people that are it's a very different energy than I'm used to being around, but there's also something nice about that. Like if you're willing to like let that take you in and bring you into a different kind of energy for a little while, it also feels kind of good to sometimes be in social situations where you wouldn't normally choose to be in them, but it's sort of like weirdly refreshing. It's like, "Oh yeah, this is an energy too. I haven't done this one in a while, and it's like you can ride on that energy for a little bit, and like you don't have to do it forever. And but that also is good in it's kind of like it's almost like socially or psychologically exercising in a weird way. It's like this is a little uncomfortable, and I feel a little bit out of place in this position. But I kind of feel like it was good to get into that posture at the same time.
I think it sounds kind of similar to like something that Sarah would tell me like when she was working in like trauma therapy. Like there was something called like widening your window of tolerance, which is just basically, being uncomfortable in situations for as long as possible to hopefully maybe to the point where it actually flips and it's not uncomfortable anymore.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think like it's really tricky because, like for someone like me, one of my things that I've always struggled with is like codependency. And
hmm,
and one of the things like wrapped around codependency is like people pleasing.
mm,
So, but there's like also an aspect of me that's just like naturally giving
yeah,
and naturally loving and naturally accepting. So it's a hard thing to sort of like tease apart, you know? But like, for instance, just going through this whole period of time with like the band going on hiatus and people sort of like dealing with their emotions about it, and when I say like people, I'm saying like fans,
yeah,
and I, initially found myself like trying to comfort other people who, I'm just sort of like sitting there like putting other people's feelings over mine often. And that was just something I had to like take a deeper look at, you know,
mm,
um, because I think just that whole experience put me in a place where I was constantly trying to please other people and always felt a sense like a sense of gratitude that was so overwhelming that it put me in a place where I felt almost unworthy and always trying to sort of like go, bend over backwards for anybody and everybody who ever supported us in any way,
yeah.
to the point where I would like fall on a sword, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's just an interesting thing to sort of learn about myself and then learn like healthy ways to create good boundaries and also just to be like real and like authentic with how I'm feeling in each moment and not push myself to make someone else feel comfortable over myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. The feedback system is so different in playing live music versus making private art, I mean, there's a public element of making art in that you send it out into the world with a little smooch and hope that people like it, but it's not the energy exchange is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I know you said you don't really miss that part of it, but there's so many things that, like, me putting myself in your place, which obviously I can't divorce my own POV from
Hmm.
what it is, but I have to imagine there's something about that that I would miss. Like dude, those pictures of you, was it at the last Warp Tour where you guys were just in front of this huge crowd that are all just so fucking stoked, to hear you guys. And that's got to be just it's such a rare level of the human experience. And I suppose that in and of itself doesn't make it particularly meaningful, but there's so many. Okay, here, I guess this is a better way to describe it. One of the things I was thinking about is just how access equals disposability, right? Like, there's one of something, it's the most valuable, and people care about it. It's the most valuable thing in the world. Like, it's priceless. There's and then the value just keeps going down the more of it there is. And then when there's wide ubiquitous access, it's really not worth much. And we've seen that happen to a lot of things, in the human experience, from music to art to now it's happening to art in a very weird, novel way. But that's one thing, man. That experience on a stage like that, you cannot make that ubiquitous. Like, that is a very difficult, unique place to get. So there's always there's part of me that, like, when you tell me that, I'm like, really? You don't miss that? You don't miss that?
I mean, there's plenty of things that I do miss about it. I think there is a sense of obliteration
Mm,
that there's not much else like it. Um, just completely disintegrating into a flow and just being kind of part of an organism that is like just all of these bodies and people um, moving and singing to something, especially something that you help create. Like there's not much else out there like it, but at the same time, for someone like me, it is really difficult to, like, there were multiple layers of anxiety that I would have to get past, and parts of self that I truly had to, like, basically, like, compartmentalize and, like, put into, like, jail. you
mm,
know um I'm not naturally a performer, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, at least I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm naturally a creator. I, like, feel very at home in the studio. I feel very invigorated by that process. But performing live was always a dance. Like, it was, and I don't, and it's a literal dance, but also like a metaphorical one with, like, my own struggle with yeah, like social anxiety, um you know and like ego,
mm,
like, I don't I felt most at home performing music when I was a kid.
mm.
um I don't know why. I
Interesting.
think that there was probably something that subconsciously shifted the second that it was something more than just an outlet um for self-expression.
Mm,
Once I could, like, always feel the gaze of, like, um people expecting something, it started to, like, change the
that's
experience,
interesting.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and I can even like mark it in my mind of like a show that This Day Forward played where like we knew like record labels were in the audience. Like I feel like that was probably the end of a period of time where I could perform and not think about anything. Um, However, like there was this complete, um, like this element in playing music in Circa is so strange. I mean, even though all of that is a part of it and something that I had to do a lot of work around and contend with, there weren't many shows in almost 20 years of being a band that I recall not losing myself at some point,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much got there almost every single show, got to a place where I disappeared, right? But that was not effortless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I was like very young playing music, I didn't even have to try. I
Interesting.
felt no fear. I felt no anxiety. I felt nothing other than just like pure exhilaration and like just oneness with like I don't know, just the
Hmm.
act of like self-expression.
Hmm.
Very weird. But I mean maybe I've torched those memories somehow. I don't know. Like but when I really think about it, it is crazy to me how different that person was when I was very young doing things that like thinking as an older person who had been performing a lot, thinking about the stuff I did when I was younger and feeling no anxiety about it. I'm just like, how the fuck did I do that stuff and like not freak out and not, you know, um, I remember being scared playing little league baseball and stuff,
Yeah.
um, like vividly. But
Hmm.
of all the times, like I started playing music at like 12 years old with other kids and performing at bar and bat mitzvahs and then like talent shows and then YMCA's and just endless. And it was just all excitement. It was just all like pure enthusiasm. Um, I don't know.
Well, I
That's
think, I mean, this might sound contrived, but you know where I'm pulling this from. I think that's because that's who you really are. Like, that's an element of who you really are on like the daimonic level. That like clearly the pull that you had at a young age toward music is was abnormally strong to a point where you were like, this is it. Like, I'm not even like I'll throw down all the chips on this being it. I mean, this is something you've told me before, is that you kind of were like, it's this or I don't know. Like, I mean, it's this or whatever. Yeah, I don't know, but I'm fucking throwing all the chips down. And it seemed like there were multiple moments where it was like, this is it because this is what my soul is calling out for. And I think when you approach something with that kind of like, it's almost like, this is a really stupid term, but it's almost like artistic jihadism or something. It's like you're like
God.
meaning like it's almost like a holy pursuit. It's like you're literally there, like ready to just like go down with the flaming ship or succeed. It's like it's that level of sincerity. And it sounds cheesy, I understand, but from me, I feel the same way when I'm doing certain things. It's like the podcast at this point is like, that's what it's become for me, where it's like, I'm fucking all in. Like, this is it. Like, I'm not backing off.
Yeah.
And I think once you hit that point, I don't think by any means it ensures success, but I think that's a point you need to get to if you want to be successful, like, for lack of a better term. But I,
Yeah.
but I do think ultimately the way that I like to think about it most is that it's something that a deeper part of you understands is like a kind of truth for you. And, for people who aren't familiar with the daimonic or the daimon or the genius, um, although I've talked about it incalculable amount of times, it's this idea that the Greeks had that you come into the world with a certain fate that's attached to you, and they believed in a being called a daimon, and the daimon is kind of like the keeper of your fate, and it sort of like supervises you in a way and whispers to you internally when you're on the wrong path and on the right path, and sort of like tries to blow the wind toward certain outcomes and deter you from others. And I feel like that there's no doubt in my mind that for you, at least at a time in your life, that music was where those winds were pushing you. And what you've managed to do with that wind is wild, dude. I don't know if you reflect on it ever, but it's the amount of people that you like influenced and that you whose lives you changed is like, it's pretty, it's got to be overwhelming when you try to think about it.
Yeah, I think maybe that's part of it. Like maybe that's what I struggled with to some degree, because you know what I was trying to get at, I think, about playing music earlier on, like I felt way more comfortable like playing on the floor, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like, you know, I just I don't really enjoy being the center of attention. I don't like
Mm.
being like on stage per se. I don't like being in front of people. I like being with people, like in the right circumstance, and um, I really enjoy um, celebration of creativity and like the human spirit, and um, um, I like the celebration of like being outcasts, like I like
Yeah.
all of that. Um, but there's something, as you are part of something that becomes quote unquote successful, and it's like you go deeper and deeper into this weird onion of like what it is to other people, but also to like yourselves. And it just gets harder and harder to like figure out what the fuck it is, and like where you are in it. and um and I don't know, there were just aspects of that that were really difficult and challenging for me to navigate, in a way that was just like healthy, you know. um Part of that was what pushed me to like, basically be like an alcoholic for like 5 years, early on. It was just like I couldn't deal with the anxiety of all the pressure, everything that was coming along with that early like fast huge rise of the band was like just too much for me. Like I just wanted to like I wanted to be back in my parents' basement, like just tinkering with my 4 track, like that's I felt like that moment, and then the moment where like we were playing for thousands of people and like dealing with like stuff that we just weren't prepared for, was like a split second. And like I just was like I don't know. I don't know. A lot of that stuff just was really difficult to process, and I think a lot of it I didn't process, um and I don't know. I do have like emotional like damage, I think, from like how much sacrifice was um required,
Mm.
not just in that band, but just like the lifestyle, and like it's ironic that we started this off with like talking about friendships and stuff, but I lost a lot of friendships just because like I couldn't be around. I lost,
Mm-hmm.
relationships with people, I'm thankful for that part of it because you know, because I love my wife, but like there was just a lot of things that were really hard, and I think a lot of things that just go unseen and maybe unappreciated, and then your body really get takes a beating. You like really, I don't know. There's just a lot of parts of it that are just really, really fucking hard that a
Hmm.
lot of musicians don't get the credit for like what is asked of them, especially independent musicians who have to like really struggle.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it just saddens me, like when I see the attitude that people have towards musicians. Like a lot of them are just like, just suck it up, man. You're living your dream, blah blah blah. Like, um, and it's just really hard, and especially seeing how it just gets harder and harder every year
Yeah.
for musicians to sell music, to like survive in capitalism. It's just really, really fucking hard. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I think
And
maybe that's why I'm grateful sometimes to be not doing it right
it
now.
makes sense. It makes sense because even from my perspective, as a semi-educated person that played in bands and like did short tours and had other friends that were professional musicians, that is the stuff that you easily your mind sort of like whitewashes away. Like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, the lugging the gear, the being on the road, the
Sleeping on
not
floors.
yeah, not eating good food, like
Hmm.
not getting paid, people not showing up to the shows. Like, I mean, that was more my experience, um,
Oh, trust
but
me,
oh
I
yeah,
had plenty of years of that too.
yeah, yeah. But it's just there's so much more than that moment of glory on the
Yeah,
stage, and it sounds like the moment of glory even has its like trials and tribulations
yeah,
for you personally. So there's yeah, it's there it's so multidimensional and so unique to the person experiencing it, which makes total sense because everything is unique to the person experiencing it. And I almost don't know if there is a healthy way to cope with that kind of adoration because you're reaching this level of people almost worshiping you where there isn't really a right way to deal with it, because one way is your ego gets huge and nobody
hmm,
likes that person.
right.
Another way is what you were describing, where maybe you feel conflicted, you feel anxious. I'm sure a lot of people suffer imposter syndrome,
Oh
and
yeah,
and I don't know like what the right way to process something that is almost like it's almost unnatural, but it's like it's unnatural in a beautiful way because the human psyche can essentially summon that situation through art in many different permutations. And that in and of itself is miraculous and beautiful. And I fucking love it. And I'm obsessed with it in a lot of ways. Like with the power of the creative spirit, the power of the muse, the power of the human mind to like tap in to this transcendent, orgasmic stream of meaning and beauty, and then filter it through in some unique way and express it. And other people can feel it too. Like, it's simultaneously the most incredible thing and one of the most dangerous things, I think, because you can misidentify your ego as the source of it. You can misidentify like your own corporeal self with where that comes from. And I think if just from like outside looking in, I think and I think you would agree with this. I think step 1 is to probably try to divorce yourself like personally, the small s self at least, from being the source of that, because if you let it get to your head, it's gonna be an ugly crash at some point, I think.
yeah. I mean, you're pretty much nailing it. Like, you're nailing why. Like, this is why I spent so much energy and time, like, reading books, reading self help books, like going to therapy, you know, learning about like, different schools of thought, like learning about Buddhism, learning about like various forms of spirituality, like experimenting with psychedelics for deeper self-reflection. And the reason is because when you're in a situation where you basically have to develop this sense of um it's beyond tuning out. Like you have to actually genuinely distrust most voices, right? So like you have to distrust the person that says that you're a fucking genius, and you also have to distrust the person that says you are an absolute piece of shit.
Yeah.
And you have to summon this strong inner constitution that has this, you know this compass of what you think is good, what you think is right, what you think is like, you know worth spending time and energy on, and what needs improvement, what could be more interesting, what could be more fulfilling, etc. Like, and you need to tune out all other noise besides basically the one that's inside of you, and then you let little bits of other people's stuff in that is maybe not in the extremities, right? The people that
Mhm.
are like, you know that you can kind of trust to not be giving you a load of bullshit, or have their own agenda, um, which is very few.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because there's lots of people that are going to resent you for the fact that you're doing something that maybe they want to do. There's a lot of people that are going to praise you because you're making them money. There are a lot of people that are going to like put you up on a pedestal because
Mhm.
there's some hole in their life or in their, constitution. So it's a lot to fucking deal
Yes, it
with,
is.
especially if you're already a person that struggles with mental health and other things, which most artists do. So, um, yeah, I think like it's totally a thing that's very difficult. And then on top of that, one of the main differences, I mean, you brought up like the difference between quietly making art on your own versus like being in this, huge like uh performance collaboration, really. I mean, the collaboration part of it is a huge thing to contend with,
Yes, it
like,
is.
being just alone in your studio making work and then putting it out into the world and having no one else to run it by and you're calling all the shots. I mean, that has its downsides, but also working with four other people and then a multitude of other people that are also, lined up to work with you in some way, whether it's management, booking agent, lawyer, business manager, record labels, like all these other people. Um, it's a lot to do it with integrity, to be fully present, to be fully like, you know, um, checked in a way that it's like, all right, we're not gonna fucking fumble the ball here. We're not gonna like do anything to make people feel like we're not, like we're taking them for granted or whatever. Like it's a huge, heavy fucking weight that like literally never ends. So that part of it, I don't miss. I
Yeah.
do, I do miss the complete obliteration of self that I would feel on stage in those moments where I could go away and just become part of the song and become part of the ocean of people there, the ocean of consciousness, really. That's something I'll always miss, but I can also transport myself back there at any point, and
Hmm.
and I got to do it for like way longer than most people ever get to do it.
That is
So
true. That is
yeah,
true. You guys did the damn thing for a long time.
yeah,
I mean, you had breaks maybe here and there, right? But well over a decade.
almost 20 years.
That's insane.
We put out our
Yeah.
first record in 2005. We got together in 2004. So it's now 2023.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You know, man, it really makes me think about time.
Not me, not at all.
um, yeah, man, that was a great explanation and a great job just not only showing the multi-dimensional element of what it takes logistically to be in a band, but also what it takes mentally to grapple with it, to make sense of it. And I mean, we didn't even talk about like the you I guess you did hint on the creative process of like all of those things, all of those balancing all the voices, but then also learning which voices to trust more, how to weigh the voices in the band that are like your peers. There's so
Hmm.
much. There's so much. I mean, I can say from experience without like casting aspersions on anyone in your band that it really is like being in a romantic relationship with however many other people are in the band, except the sex is the point that that you're trying to like ultimately the ultimate point of a romantic relationship, obviously in its highest expression, is sex. The ultimate expression of a band unit is obviously playing the music, making the music, and all of the dynamics involved and all of the pieces that need to go in the right spot in making sure that this one's not uncomfortable over here and this one's, it's a miracle that it happens at all, to be quite honest. Like it's like even just knowing what it takes to go from like I have this riff to having that be a complete song and going in a studio and recording it and getting the art and all it it's miraculous that it's happening on such a wide level to this day. But yeah, and then everything else that you described, which is like the 0.01% of people doing that get to this level of of just like capturing thousands of other people with it, like capturing the souls of thousands of other people. It's something that is so like almost mythologically rare. And I think that's why people do put it on a pedestal, because it's just like they can't understand what it takes to get there. They can't understand what that alchemy to get to that place is. And I think oftentimes even people who are in the bands don't fully understand it. Like, there's I think there are some bands where it's like super self-evident, and I would argue actually that your band was probably one of those bands because of just like the timing and how unique it was when it came out, and the sort of like wave of just people who were so clearly heavily influenced by what you were doing. I think it's pretty clear that there was a lot of power behind what was driving that band at that time. But there
We
are some
we
bands that it's
definitely were not aware of it. I mean, we were like, I would say for especially the first 5 years or so, like, you know, just super like completely connected to the muse in a way that was like so detached, to where we would have these moments of just pure like terror when we would realize we were like recording stuff, because we're just like, who the fuck is gonna like this? Like we just felt like it just didn't fit in any box, and it just felt very strange and not like, I don't know. We just, but we were like so in our own bubble. It was really delightful, especially in the very very early moments of the band, because you know that's one of the other things we didn't really get to, is like our band was recording our first record like basically when MySpace became a thing.
oh
So
yeah, yeah.
so like the difference of how present and how like promotional we had to be as people just was like exponentially increasing from day one all the way to our hiatus. Like it was just literally like more and more and more of you was required to do it. Like, and now, like, I mean, maybe another plus side of us not doing it right now is that we're not doing it really in the age where basically every single band is like expected to like, you know, go viral on TikTok. Like,
Right.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's like now part of like the marketing plan. But like, you know, we had a few years there that were just so pure and just so like um and we spent our entire career fighting to be in that place of purity
Mm-hmm.
as much as possible, even though it was constantly being sort of ripped away from us, like at times that we'd have to sort of, you know, metaphorically fight people for it. But yeah, I mean, the there was just like a real beauty of us feeling like we were doing something that was totally true to ourselves and like felt very unique and genuine. Um, but as soon as we were like, oh my God, a label is going to try to sell this to people, like it would be like, no one's going to like it. Then people liked it.
Yes, I did. Yeah, so all you guys have to do is move back in together again, and you'll be back. You'll be tapped back into the muse. So you've obviously, I think I know what you mean. But when you say tapped into the muse,
Mm-hmm.
you said that both about your own art early on in this conversation and about the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious what specifically tapping into the muse entails for you, or if you just use that as another way to say like flow, or how you think of it. And do you actually consider the muse to be almost like a being or an archetype that you tap into, or what are your thoughts on it?
Um, yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, it is shorthand for like, you know, being in flow, but at the same time, I mean, I've certainly pondered many a time if it's some type of being. I mean, I don't know. It it's without a doubt one of the greater mysteries that I've had to contend with in my life is just like, I don't know, like um so much of the things I've been a part of creating, whether it's on my own or with other people, I've been mystified by after the fact and been like, how did that happen?
Mm.
And very often feel like there is some type of like hidden hand, like something, um, something playing a role that's outside of yourself and the people, you know, if you're collaborating outside of them as well. But who knows? I mean, I I think that there's a lot to be said on either side of that. Like, you know, uh, I like the mystery of it. I enjoy I enjoy leaning into the more mystical aspects of it because for whatever reason in my life, the more I do that, the more creative I feel and the more uh, I feel like rewarded for it. So it's kind of like I don't. It's like if it's not broken, don't fix it, kind of thing. Um, I don't know. What about you? What do you think?
I don't have a strong personal connection to what I feel like must be a being, or a like an archetype that's alive that you can tap into, but I definitely want there to be. Like, I
Yeah.
definitely want that to be a thing. I'm As you know, I'm very very heavily pulled toward mythopoetic ways of making sense of things, in
Mm-hmm.
the same way that I feel compelled to sometimes procrastinate or take shortcuts. I feel compelled to want to just like poke holes in this people who are so sure of themselves that there's nothing more. Like the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world just make me want to just like,
Yeah.
you don't fucking know what you're talking about. Like you know a lot of equations, you know a lot of facts about astrophysics. You can sit here and mechanistically describe the way planets orbit and gravity works, but you don't know shit. Like there's part of me that just wants to, but at the same time, I deeply appreciate that kind of wisdom. I deeply appreciate science and logic based knowledge. I just don't think that that's it. There's a very strong sense in me that that's not it,
Hmm.
but that there's the, oh, I'm losing the word now, but there's the platonic. I mean, maybe it's just ideal. Maybe I'm just looking for the ideal, but um, that was like Plato had. We've probably talked about this, but he had a tiered system of the kinds of knowing, and I haven't read it directly in a while, but it's like the lower tiers of knowing are like things you heard from someone else, things you saw or felt with your senses. Then there's like the empirical knowledge of like mathematics that you can concretely demonstrate cause and effect. This is true. I've found the pattern that like shows that this works. But then there's the type of knowledge above all of that. And the type of knowledge that's above all of that is somewhat transcendent and can only be approached through the human mind, through like rigorous internal work on a principle or something like that. And that's really resonates with me, that there's a deep transcendent truth that does exist, and it's not just like some wish or desire, or it's not relative, it's not in the eye of the beholder, that there is a truth above everything else. And in a way, I think that the muse could be a kind of conduit for that truth, and it could
Hmm.
be the conduit of the truth that connects to the human psyche and tries to let truth, transcendent truth, flow from it into the human psyche. And I think in that event, there's attenuation, like something is lost. Like there's no perfect transmission, but
Hmm.
we can still feel the signature. Like we can still feel the signature on the authentic shit. And that's why some things really take off. It's like we feel the signature. And I don't think popularity is necessarily an indication, because I think like within popularity, there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of projection, there's a lot of shadow shit going on. And
Hmm.
that's why like a mumble rapper might get popular or something. But then there's also the kind of popularity that emanates from like this person is connected. Like this person is fucking connected, or this group of people is connected. Um, so I guess that's how I think of it. And I just love like, Stephen Pressfield, the author of
Of
War of
course.
Art.
Hmm.
He has the invocation to the muse from the Odyssey like hung up where he writes. And I want to say I remember him saying that he like says it but like every day when he sits down or something like that. And I fucking love that. Whether or
Yeah.
not it's real or it does anything, I'm on board with that. And I've been meaning to print it out and like put it up in here somewhere actually. We haven't
Sure.
talked about all the amazing success you've been having lately, but we've talked about it before. But Colin is actively making art under. Do you have a preferred moniker now? Is it do you mainly go as ADHD or Space
Uh,
Case?
Either one's fine.
Yeah.
I
If you
utilize
like,
I utilize the Twitter, lets you have a handle and then also a name. So my handle is ADHD143, but my name is Space Case. So I like to make it nice and convoluted and confusing.
other than me just dumbing it down as abstract, do you have a way you like to describe your art?
Um, I mean, no, that's fine. I mean, I think it's like I, I've heard a lot of people say it's kind of like digital post abstract just because I guess a lot of the stuff I do kind of walks the line between figurative and abstract. I do a lot of purely abstract work, but I've been doing a lot of like weird sort of like hyper psychedelic collage type stuff.
Yeah. And putting things like the copium pepe in your pieces is
Yeah.
fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do utilize collage a lot, as well as a lot of digital painting, and then a lot of like analog stuff that I'll scan in, and then so it's basically like mixed media type of approach. But whatever, it's kind of the same thing with my name. It's like whatever is like the best way I feel about it. I love like it feels so um in touch with right now to not have a distinct like name or like style or genre. It's just like, yeah, find me. Okay. Like if you connect to it, cool. Like awesome. I don't know. There's something about it that I love how I don't know. It's just distinctly now. Uh and very like potent feeling to work with digital tools and to be sort of like pseudo anonymous. I mean, um people can make the connection, and like I'm not trying to hide it. Obviously we've talked about it here, and um whatever, but like there's something super freeing and awesome about that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And yeah, I've always kind of fantasized about that, like having like being one of those musicians or like people who just like they just always have a mask on. You just don't know who they are.
Uh-huh.
There's there's always something about that that's really appealing to me. I don't know
Yeah,
why. I don't
because
know
you
why.
can be free of your own bullshit
This is true.
to
This
some
is true.
extent.
But then you have to forever be associated with whatever you choose to put on. Like like Dead Mouse always has to be this like giant mouse head guy.
Right.
I guess that was his sin. Um Man, speaking of digital tools, I can't believe we didn't even talk about AI because that was one of the things
Yeah,
I
and
said we were going to
we
talk
didn't talk
about.
about the synchronicity or anything.
Oh my God, we have to talk about
We
that.
we
Well,
done nothing.
all right. Well, let's close it out with the sync. Let's close
Okay.
it out with the sync.
You want to talk about why you want to retell this story, or
Well, part of it is that I just recently went down the synchronicity rabbit hole and that I made a video about it and explored the sort of deeper implications that Jung believed synchronicities were pointing to, in that, you know, a lot of people, for whatever reason, they get really fixated on the phenomenon of synchronicity. Like it's common, like there probably more people have heard of synchronicity than have heard of Jung, which is pretty mind blowing. But so they for whatever reason, it's become almost viral, almost mimetic, in that people just know what it is. But it's more than just like a weird occurrence. It's more than just a weird coincidence that applies to the individual. And for Jung, it was indicative of hidden connectivity that transcends our understanding. And he called that hidden connectivity the unus mundus, which means one world, like this Latin phrase for the one world. And people would liken it to the Tao, you know, this sort of thing that you can feel the signature of, this transcendent unity you can feel the signature of, but it escapes measurement, it escapes our understanding completely. And he
Mhm.
believed that when we were part of a true synchronicity, that this is like some of the greatest evidence for that hidden unity. So that's part of it, is that I just went down this rabbit hole and I alluded to this synchronicity in it, but I didn't discuss it. I feel like maybe I should have. But part of it too is like, you know, I'm pushing these out onto YouTube now and hopefully hitting new audiences in at least a small way. And I just think this is such a mind-blowing story. And not only is it mind-blowing, but we have evidence of it. We have proof that it occurred. Because this is one that I think is so multi-dimensional that if I heard about it, I'd be like, I need evidence for this. This sounds pretty fucking out
S-
there.
why I would always take pictures and try to document stuff as much as possible anytime this kind of stuff happened to me.
Yeah. So that's, I guess that's the primary reason. Um, so I guess I'll just launch into it from my memory, and please interrupt me at all the points where I forget stuff or that you have important context, because I'll probably forget certain things. So Colin and I are flying out to Peru for the ayahuasca retreat. He's leaving from Oregon. I'm leaving from Chicago, and then we were both supposed to fly to um, what's the name of the city in Peru? Lima. We were both supposed to fly to Lima and meet in Lima, and then we were going to go to Iquitos together, where we would stay one night in a hotel. Then we would go to the ayahuasca retreat. So Colin gets on his first leg of his flight. I go to Chicago. I'm at the airport. I'm waiting in line to board the plane, and there are people already boarding. And just suddenly, they're like, "This flight is canceled," and they don't give any, recourse as to what to do, whatever. And I immediately start freaking out because I have to make this flight, because flights into that city of Iquitos are pretty few and far between. And plus, Colin is already on his way to Lima. We're supposed to split this hotel. It's just like a logistical nightmare. I'm all worried. I let Colin know, and yeah, I guess why don't you tell what you did when I
Okay.
let you know?
Yeah. So I think another aspect of this is just sort of the pre adventure jitters that are just
Yes.
sort of like, we're going into a very new novel experience. And I think, you know, to some degree, like counting on each other for
Yeah,
like
totally.
companionship, and like to go through some of the harder parts of it, which are like, navigating a new city, finding a meetup that we had to find, and just all this different kind of crap that your mind is just like, oh, that's going to be easier with my traveling partner, because we can put our heads together and know what to do. um so I'm at the airport and getting ready to fly out, and um I believe I had a direct flight to Lima. Like, I don't think I had a layover or anything. But then from there, you fly to Iquitos. Pretty sure I'm not screwing that up. But so let me think about this. No, I did have a layover. Okay. Um, I had a short flight to somewhere in America first, and then I was flying to Lima from there. Uh, Getting on my first flight, and I'm starting to feel all types of sort of like waves of just anxiety, and just trying to calm myself down. And then I'm just feeling good. I'm like, fuck it, everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. I'm doing all kinds of like mindfulness exercises, and my just trying to stay zen. And then I get a text from Michael that he's having this issue. His flight's canceled. And instantly I think like, oh, there's this possibility that you might not make it, or you might say like, fuck it. Cause like at the time I didn't know you enough to whether or not like maybe you were having more fear than you let on. Maybe you were really like, maybe you just be like, all right, you know what? This obstacle is enough to sort of like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say fuck it and go home. So part of me, there was like this thought that flashed by, like, I might be going by myself. Like, okay, whatever. Like, I just, so I was fighting off a lot of that type of like external noise and anxiety. And I just thought to myself, like, all right, it's going to be whatever it's going to be. I'm going no matter what. I feel called to do this. I'm going to go do this. But prior to the trip, I was sort of accumulating various like visualizations and like meditations, and one of the ones that my wife Sarah told me was this exercise of surrounding yourself with roses. basically like you close your eyes and basically imagine all these like roses like blooming around you and kind of like surrounding you, and it's a very like calming vision and something that's sort of like a visualization of like protection
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thing. So like as I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, I start to do that, and I close my eyes and I start to imagine myself surrounded by roses. And
Hold on.
I
So I have to do a quick meantime.
okay.
So from my perspective, the flight is canceled. I scramble over to the customer service desk and I'm like, I have to get to Peru like before morning. Like I don't know, like I'm whatever. So I stand there for like an hour, and it's just a lot of this woman behind the counter going, mm, eh, shaking her head, being like, just making a lot of groany, like this is not going to happen type noises. And eventually, she just taps out and says, I can get you on a flight to Miami in the morning, and then from Miami you'll go to Lima, and you'll have like some really short amount of time to make your connection flight. Not to mention, I'm just remembering this now, there was a hurricane off the coast of Miami. And she's like, you're going to fly to Miami in the morning. Are you sure I should do that? And she's like, you should be fine. Yeah, it looks like you should be fine. So I'm just like, all right. I mean, and then they're like, oh, yeah, and sorry, we can't comp the hotel because it's weather related. So you're on your own. You can call this number, though, for a discounted hotel. So I call, and it's like a shitty hotel for like $100. And I think to myself, I guarantee if I just look up a hotel, I can find a nicer hotel closer for the same or less. So I find a place, I'm like, oh, this place looks nice. It's really close. I'm going to go here. So meanwhile, Colin and I are going back and forth. I arrive at the hotel. And it's from my perspective, that's when you start telling me about
Yeah.
this visualization and what's going on. So continue.
So what happens is I open my eyes after doing the visualization, and I'm in the terminal about to board. So I'm all right, no turning back now. I'm getting on the plane and going. And so open my eyes after the visualization of surrounding myself in roses and feel very calm, and I feel like a smile overtake me. And I just feel like everything's going to be good. And I look up as I open my eyes and look up, right in front of me is this guy. Like I basically just stare right at this guy's luggage, and his bag that he is holding has just this crazy rose pattern all over it. And I just sort of giggle, and then I look and notice that his hand has a rose tattooed on it. And then I noticed that he's got roses tattooed on his arms. And then I look, he's got roses on his head. He literally has a head tattoo of roses. And he's holding a water bottle with stickers on it that are roses. And I just fucking like laughed out loud, and I was like, oh my God. Um, and so I was basically just laughing the whole time. But I got on the flight. I couldn't get Wi-Fi, but I got like textability. And during that whole time is like when you were like kind of like getting
Mm-hmm.
situated and like figuring out all that stuff. So there was kind of like a gap in communications, and I didn't know
Yeah.
exactly what was happening yet with you. I don't know if you even had figured it out yet. But you text me while I was in the air,
Mm-hmm.
very close to landing in my on my layover, and you're like, everything's all good. I got it figured out. This is what's going to happen. And I was just like, oh, I kind of had a feeling that everything was going to work out, because this crazy thing just happened. And I explained to you, like, I did this visualization and then this guy, and I told you all about the guy. And then again, I had to shut off my phone. Like, I sent you all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had to shut off my phone because we were getting ready to land.
Yeah.
So I shut off my phone. And then as I land,
So I'll,
I open my
yeah.
phone and there's a bunch of text messages from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here, so again, flipping back over to my perspective, I'm sitting at this hotel bar. I order some food and no drinking, of course, because it was ayahuasca. So I'm on dieta. I think I had a veggie burger. And I ordered the food and I'm reading these texts from Colin about the whole rose visualization, the guy covered in roses. And my whole body starts tingling and the hairs are standing up on the back of my neck. And I say to Colin, dude. And I just take a picture of my menu and I send it to him because on embossed on the menu is the name of the hotel that I randomly chose, and it's called the Rose Hotel.
Yes.
And it just says Rose really big on it and has like a picture of a rose as the logo. And so yeah, you can, and then you can tell when I sent you this and you finally saw it. Like, I mean, I just think we both short circuited. We were both like, oh, like,
Well, you were just like, you're like, dude, it's insane that you're telling me this right now. You're not gonna believe it. You're not gonna believe where I'm staying. And then you sent this picture of the menu, and I was like, holy shit. And I just like, I basically had like, I got like teary. I kind of just like
yeah,
felt like this, like, whoa, like it was a huge, just like a sigh of relief too. It almost felt like it was this very meaningful moment of like reassurance. That's kind of how it felt.
yeah, and I mean that's definitely how I took it too in the time, I think. But I also just took it as this, just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, what, like, how did this just happen? And there always is a part of me that's trying to rationalize it or diminish it, or just think about what a skeptical person would say to
Hmm.
try to e- explain it away or something.
Yeah.
And this is one of those rare moments where I'm just like, good fucking luck. Good fucking luck rationalizing this one away, because the
Yeah.
layers, the people involved, it's just too much. And the timing was like impeccable.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the coincidence of the guy with all the rose stuff and the fact that you're staying at the hotel is a lot, right? But like we never would have even known if it wasn't for the visualization exercise, which I would never have done if you hadn't. At least I would say I wouldn't have done it then if you
Right.
hadn't told me that your flight had been canceled. And if your flight hadn't been canceled, you wouldn't have stayed in the hotel. So all these things are like intermingled. And then I wouldn't have done the exercise if Sarah hadn't told me, hey, let me teach you this thing real quick before you go. And
Yeah.
that was like this thing that she really wanted to like tell me to do. And she like was even saying like, when you feel like, she was thinking more like, you know, in the ceremony, like,
Yeah.
when you're like, when you're, drinking ayahuasca and like tripping your brains out, here's like a grounding exercise for you. She wasn't thinking like you're going to do this like the second you get to the airport.
Oh, yeah. And this
Um,
reminds me too, another thing that we were saying even prior to this was like, oh, the ceremony already started. Remember,
right.
the ceremony already started. And I was kind of like, okay, okay. And then the and then the trip got canceled. And I was really feeling like, oh, now that kind of takes on a whole new meaning. And then
Hmm.
that happened. And it's just like, okay, this is,
Well, yeah, we were talking all about like threshold guardians like prior,
yes, yes,
and basically how it's like, um, how, what are you willing to do to walk through the fire, and you have to sort of like go through all of these trials, and it just felt like immediately initiation began, and yeah, the whole very like commonly said thing is that the ceremony actually begins the moment in which you decide that you're going to do it. That could be months prior, and in our case it was. So
yes. I'm glad we revisited that.
Me
That
too.
was a nice little nipple shock from the Mysterium Tremendum
Yeah.
to recall. Yeah, man. Well, it's a twisty turny mind meld, but I'm definitely glad we got that in, and it's always a pleasure rapping with you, man. And I think
Likewise.
I may just take that bit and do like a separate thing first with it, because I think it's just such a wild, potent, weird story that
Yeah.
other people might get a wonder wiggle out of it.
Do it.